Let us begin. Not with a bang, but with a candle. A small, flickering stub of beeswax. The only source of light in a world that once went completely dark at night. Welcome to the medieval world. A time before electricity, before alarm clocks, and before the comforting glow of your phone screen. A time when people feared the dark not just metaphorically, but very, very literally. The year is something like 1326. The village is small, damp, and likely smells faintly of wet straw and cabbage. The sun has set, and in this world, when the sun sets, the day is truly done. There's no nightlife, no scrolling, no binge-watching. There's just the silence of thatch roofs, distant hooting of owls, and maybe, if you're unlucky, the sound of something scratching in the walls. It is nighttime in medieval Europe. But what does that mean? You probably think people just went to bed, slept all night, woke up. But no, the truth is far stranger and far less comfortable. In the medieval world, sleep was not a single, solid block. People didn't crawl under a duvet at 11 p.m. and sleep until 7. They practiced something modern scientists call biphasic sleep. 2 sleeps, separated by a mysterious stretch of nighttime wakefulness. Between the first sleep and the second sleep, people got up, did chores, prayed, chatted, or, well, did things you'll hear more about soon. This was normal. This was ordinary. This was the night. Over the next long, slow journey, we'll explore the habits, rituals, and sometimes disturbing facts about how people in the Middle Ages slept, lived, and survived the dark. You'll learn about their strange beliefs, their odd bedtime practices, and their very medieval ideas of comfort. We'll visit the manor house of a noble, where thick drapes shut out drafts and ghosts. We'll stop by the peasant's hut, where 5 people and a pig might share the same straw bed. We'll even wander into a monastery, where monks rise in the dead of night to chant and pray. The journey will be slow, gentle, sometimes ridiculous, always true. So get comfortable, dim the lights, and prepare to enter a world where sleep was strange, nights were terrifying, and dreams were considered messages from the divine, or from the devil. This is the medieval night. Let us begin. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. You've had your dinner, perhaps a thick slice of rye bread, a little broth, maybe a hunk of hard cheese. It's evening. The fire has died down to embers. Outside, the village is silent except for the wind and the occasional dog bark. You're in bed, or what passes for one. A pile of straw, maybe a wooden frame, with coarse wool blankets. And then, you fall asleep. But not until morning. Not in one long stretch. In the Middle Ages, people didn't sleep through the night. Instead, they practiced segmented sleep, something long forgotten in the modern world. It went like this. After the sun went down, people would go to bed sometime after supper, usually not long after dark. This first period of sleep lasted a few hours and was known as the first sleep. People would rise sometime around midnight or slightly earlier, but they didn't panic or complain of insomnia. Waking up in the middle of the night was expected, natural, even welcomed. This period, between first and second sleep, was known as the watch, or sometimes just wake time. What did people do in these shadowed hours? Well, some prayed. Night was sacred, and they believed that prayers between sleeps had special power. Others might tend to small tasks, mend clothing, stoke the fire, or check on animals. Some might sit and think. Some might even visit neighbors, if the moonlight was good. But others, well, others might spend this quiet time in more intimate pursuits. Doctors of the time even recommended this midnight window as the best time for conceiving children. The body, they believed, was warm, rested, and the mind unburdened from the day. In a world without electric lights, this 2-part sleep pattern made sense. People aligned their rest with the natural rise and fall of light and darkness. The long medieval night simply couldn't be filled by one long nap. And after a few hours, when the fire was stoked once more and the air chilled again, people returned to bed for the second sleep. The second sleep lasted until dawn. This pattern has been found in documents diaries, medical texts, even legal testimonies. One 15th-century French text refers to a man who rose after his first sleep and went to his neighbor's house. In an English court record from 1302, a woman is said to have woken from her first sleep and found the door ajar. They weren't insomniacs. They were just medieval. Modern science even supports this old way of resting. In the 1990s, a sleep researcher named Thomas conducted an experiment. He exposed people only to natural light cycles. The result? After several days, their sleep split naturally into two distinct segments, with a quiet, meditative hour in between. It seems our ancestors weren't wrong. They just slept differently. So, the next time you find yourself awake in the dark at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, take comfort. You're not broken. You're just a little medieval. So, you've fallen asleep, or tried to, in your scratchy wool garments, on a straw-filled mattress stuffed into a creaky wooden frame. The fire is low. The air is cold. The wind moans outside. But here's a question you may not have considered. Who's in bed with you? In the medieval world, the concept of personal space, especially in sleep, was wildly different from what we expect today. Privacy, as we know it, didn't exist. And a bed, quite often, wasn't a private place at all. For the poor, sharing a bed was not just common, it was necessary. Whole families might sleep together, huddled for warmth in small one-room homes. Children, parents, even grandparents, all lined up in a row like medieval sardines, perhaps even with a dog or a chicken tucked in somewhere along the edge. There was no my room or your room. There was only the room. And it wasn't just family. In inns or monasteries, travelers might be expected to share a bed with total strangers. This wasn't considered odd or uncomfortable, it was just life. A practical way to conserve space and body heat. In fact, in many guest houses and hospitals, sleeping two or more to a bed was written into the rules. Even royalty and nobility weren't entirely spared the experience of shared sleep. Though nobles had larger beds and more privacy, they still shared sleeping chambers with servants, attendants, and sometimes visiting guests. A noblewoman might have a maid asleep at the foot of the bed. A king might have a squire or guard within arm's reach, just in case the night brought danger. But what about how they slept? Here things become even more interesting. In artwork and literature from the period, we see a variety of sleeping positions. People often slept partially upright, with pillows or bolsters propping up the upper body. This wasn't just for comfort. It was believed that lying completely flat could lead to death-like sleep, or encourage bad vapors to rise from the stomach into the brain. A slight incline was thought to keep one safe, both from choking and from demons. Yes, demons. Nightmares and sleep paralysis were explained as the work of nocturnal spirits like the mare or incubus. These evil beings were believed to sit on your chest, steal your breath, or even ride you in your sleep. Keeping the upper body raised was one way to prevent such supernatural intrusions. As for sleepwear, most people didn't own special pajamas. They simply slept in their linen undergarments, or sometimes in their full clothing, especially in winter. Poorer folks might sleep naked, not by choice, but because they owned no spare garments. Wealthier people sometimes wore nightcaps, not just for warmth, but to protect the head from night air, which was believed to cause illness. Some couples even slept with a board between them, a literal divider, to maintain modesty, especially in households with many onlookers. So when you imagine a peaceful medieval night, think again. Think of bodies piled together for warmth. Think of dogs curled at the feet, lice in the blankets, and drafts creeping under the door. Think of people sleeping half-sitting, suspicious of demons and digestive troubles. Sleep came, eventually, but rarely in comfort, and never, ever alone. The fire is almost out. Just a faint red glow, like the final breath of a dying star, remains in the hearth. You lie awake in the pitch-black room, and the only sound is your own breath, or so you hope. Because in the medieval world, the dark was never empty. It was filled, not with monsters of imagination, but with deeply believed fears. Let us take a moment now to talk about darkness. Not metaphorical darkness, not fear of sin or damnation, but actual, physical, all-consuming night. Before electric lights, before the street lamp, before even the glowing ember of a cigarette tip in the distance, night in the Middle Ages was complete. It swallowed the world. A blanket of black that fell over villages, castles, monasteries. Nocturnal silence broken only by rustling leaves, creaking timbers, and something outside. People were not only uncomfortable with the dark, they were terrified of it. Nighttime was when evil things stirred. Not just thieves and wolves, but spirits, demons, and witches. Many believed the devil himself worked most freely at night. That was why prayers before bed were so common, not simply ritual, but protection. Words of defense against what lay in the blackness. From ghoulies and ghosties, and long-legged beasties, and things that go bump in the night, good Lord, deliver us. The medieval world was full of such charms and sayings. People hung herbs above the door, made the sign of the cross before sleep, or kept iron under the bed to ward off spirits. Some even slept with blessed objects beneath their pillows, a tiny piece of saint's bone, a snippet of holy linen, or a cross carved into the bedpost. The fear wasn't irrational, at least not entirely. Fires could break out. Wolves did roam. Diseases often struck in the night, when the body was weakest and the air coldest. Bandits, if nearby, preferred the cover of dark, and superstition filled the rest. People told tales of the wild hunt, a ghostly procession of dead souls and fey creatures galloping across the sky at midnight. They warned of the night hag, who crushed chests and stole breath. Even animals weren't safe from suspicion. A black cat in the wrong place might be a witch's familiar. If you woke in the night, between your first and second sleep, you might lie still, listening. Was that the wind? Was that scratching on the door? Sometimes, you simply waited for the dawn. Others whispered of chime hours, special moments, often between midnight and 3 a.m., when the boundaries between this world and the next were weakest. It was during these hours, they believed, that visions might come, that ghosts might walk, that your soul, if not protected, could be pulled elsewhere. And so sleep, while necessary, was never entirely safe. The darkness made everything larger: fear, sound, shadow, and superstition. And to be awake in the middle of it was to exist between the known and the unknown, between the natural world and something else. So they lit their candles, hung their charms, whispered their prayers. And when that didn't work, they listened and trembled and waited for the light. In the flickering dark, after your body had settled and your breath slowed, something else began to stir. Dreams. To the medieval mind, dreams were never dismissed as random. They were not just the brain sorting thoughts or a bit of cheese before bed. No, dreams were messages. From heaven, from hell, from your own soul. And you were expected to pay attention. Dreams could foretell war, warn of betrayal, deliver instructions from saints, or reveal hidden sins. A dream was not simply a private thing. It was often told to a priest, a confessor, or even discussed publicly if it seemed to hold importance. Dream interpretation was a serious business. Monks studied manuals that linked dream images to spiritual truths. A snake might represent temptation. A burning building might signify divine punishment. A white dove might point toward purity and God's favor. And then, there were nightmares. The line between a bad dream and a supernatural event was thin. People genuinely believed that something could sit on your chest while you slept, suffocating you, paralyzing you, stealing your breath. They called it the mare, an old spirit from which we get the word nightmare. A dark figure that crept into rooms and climbed onto sleepers, pinning them down. And if the mare came often, it meant something was wrong, something spiritual. Sleep paralysis, as we now call it, was seen as evidence of spiritual attack. If someone thrashed in their sleep, muttered nonsense, or screamed in the dark, it might be the work of a demon, or of a soul wrestling with hidden guilt. For this reason, people often kept holy relics by the bed. Some even wrote short prayers on parchment and wore them to sleep, sewn into fabric, so that God's word could protect their mind as well as their body. And not all dreams were terrifying. Some were sacred. Many saints, especially monks and nuns, were said to have received visions during sleep. dreams in which angels spoke, or the Virgin Mary appeared, or a golden path unfolded showing the way to heaven. There are entire hagiographies, saintly biographies, built around these dream visions. One nun in the 12th century claimed that Christ himself came to her in a dream, telling her to found a convent. Another dreamt of walking through a forest and seeing the devil in disguise, a warning, she said, that someone in her abbey was sinning in secret. Even ordinary folk sometimes claimed dreams with meaning. A farmer dreams of his ox being stolen and wakes to find it missing. A child sees her dead grandmother and is told where a missing ring is buried. A merchant dreams of drowning and avoids sailing the next day, only to hear of a shipwreck later. Dreams could be warnings or gifts. The key was knowing the difference. And in a world without science, without Freud, without sleep studies, the medieval mind turned to scripture, folklore, and faith to interpret what the night had to say. So when you imagine lying in a medieval bed, half asleep, half aware, imagine this. A world where every flicker of the mind might be divine, where your dream could save your life or curse your soul, where even the quietest whisper in the night might echo from heaven itself. You may have had a divine dream, or a nightmare sent by a demon, but as you shift under the scratchy woolen blanket, you feel something much more earthly. An itch. Yes. Welcome back to the physical bed, or what passed for one. In the medieval world, your sleeping arrangement wasn't merely about whether you had a feather pillow, unlikely, or a down duvet, more unlikely, or an adjustable mattress, hilariously unthinkable. It was about surviving the night in a tangle of harsh textures, cold drafts, and most unpleasantly bugs. Let's begin with the bed itself. If you were lucky, you had a frame of wood, slightly raised from the ground, though this didn't always prevent rodents from paying visits. The mattress was typically a pallet, a large sack stuffed with straw, hay, reeds, or heather. These materials had to be regularly fluffed, shaken, and changed, otherwise they became flattened, moldy, and infested. Even in wealthier homes, the mattress might be filled with wool or horsehair, tied to the bed frame with ropes, which needed regular tightening, hence the phrase, sleep tight. But now let's talk about the creatures that shared your bed. Fleas, common, irritating, and hard to avoid. Lice, living in hair and bedding alike, spreading easily. Bedbugs, yes, they existed, and yes, they bit. Mice, frequently skittering under the bed or even into it. Spiders and earwigs, climbing across wooden beams or hiding in straw. You didn't change your sheets weekly. Most people didn't have sheets at all. Linen was expensive. Washing was laborious. So people slept in their underclothes, or even naked, directly on rough woolen blankets that weren't washed for months, sometimes years. And while we're being honest, let's talk about bodily needs. There was no indoor plumbing. If you needed to relieve yourself at night, you used a chamber pot, a ceramic or wooden bowl kept under the bed. You hoped not to spill it. You hoped it didn't smell too bad. You hoped it wasn't already full. In monasteries or castles, there might be a garderobe, a small chute built into the outer wall where waste could fall away. But for most common folk, it was the pot, or a trip outside in the dark, hoping not to step in something. Then there were other realities of sleep. Snoring, echoed in rooms shared with entire families. Coughing, a common sound, especially in winter. Moaning, from pain, fever, childbirth, or even spiritual torment. The sound of rats gnawing behind the walls. Sleep was not silent, not pure, not hygienic. It was a daily battle between body and bed, warmth and infestation, exhaustion and interruption. And still, people slept. They had to, despite it all, despite the lice and the prayers and the smells. Sleep wasn't about perfection. It was about restoration, about resetting the soul and body, no matter how imperfect the conditions. So tonight, when you slip into your clean sheets and rest your head on your ergonomic pillow, think of your medieval counterpart, scratching in the dark, praying between bites, and dreaming, somehow, all the same. The first pale fingers of dawn creep through your window if your humble home has one. Or maybe just the faintest crack beneath the door, letting a sliver of cold morning air slip inside. You awaken. But waking in the medieval world was not as simple as opening your eyes and stretching. Your body is heavy from the restless night, your breath still slow and deep. Outside, the rooster crows or a church bell tolls, signaling the start of a new day. But before rising, there were rituals and routines designed to prepare your body, mind, and spirit for the tasks ahead. For many, waking was gradual, a process rather than a moment. You might lie still for several minutes, gathering your strength. You might mutter a morning prayer, thanking God for survival through the night and asking for protection in the coming day. In monasteries, waking was marked by the matins, a series of early morning prayers and chants, often before the sun even rose. Monks would rise from their straw mattresses, wash in cold water, don their habits, and file quietly to the chapel. For peasants, the day often began with tending the fire. Relighting the hearth was critical. Without a fire, food couldn't be cooked. Water wouldn't boil. The house remained cold and dark. Washing was minimal, cold water from a basin or stream, if you were lucky. There was no warm shower waiting. Brush your teeth? Likely with a twig or cloth, if at all. Clothing for the day was donned over nightwear or undergarments. Layers were important, as medieval weather was harsh, and your body needed protection from the cold. Breakfast was a simple affair. Black bread, perhaps soaked in ale or watered-down wine. Porridge, if available. Maybe a small piece of cheese or dried fruit. Children and adults alike might help with chores immediately after waking, feeding animals, carrying water, preparing tools. And yet, amidst the hard work, the medieval morning was full of small hopes. The sunlight meant life would continue. The night's dangers had passed for now. You had made it through the darkness. So you rise, stiff, tired, and maybe still itching from bedbugs, but alive, and ready to begin again. The sun climbs higher in the sky. By mid-morning, the day's work is well underway. Fields are tilled, animals fed, markets bustling. But the medieval day was not just about endless labor. Even in hard times, people understood the value of rest, especially when the sun was at its hottest. This is where the midday rest or siesta quietly made its mark. In many parts of medieval Europe, especially in warmer regions, a brief nap or pause in work was common around noon. This break gave the body and mind a chance to recover from the morning's toil. For peasants, it might mean sitting down under a tree or in the shade of the barn, sharing a small meal and closing their eyes for a short while. For the nobility, a midday rest might take place in a cool chamber, away from the sun's glare. Interestingly, many medieval monasteries also included a time for rest during the day. After the morning prayers and work, monks would rest briefly before resuming their tasks and evening devotions. This rhythm of work and rest reflected a practical understanding of human needs. That even in a world filled with hardship, balance was necessary. The midday rest also fit within the broader medieval concept of canonical hours, set times for prayer, work, and rest. Even today, some regions retain this tradition, a quiet echo from centuries past. So next time you feel the afternoon slump, remember, the medieval people might have understood your need for a pause far better than you think. As the sun dips low and shadows lengthen, the medieval world begins to slow. The day's labor winds down. Animals are fed for the last time. The fire is stoked for evening warmth. Evening was a sacred, deliberate time, a transition from light to dark, from action to rest. Families gathered around the hearth, sharing the meager remains of their meal. Food was often simple, a pottage stew, coarse bread, maybe some salted fish or vegetables. Light was scarce and precious. Candles were expensive, and oil lamps dim. Most homes relied on the hearth's firelight, flickering and unreliable. This dim light shaped the rhythm of medieval evenings. Work stopped early, and people turned inward to family, prayer, or storytelling. Before bed, many performed a final prayer ritual, asking for protection through the night. In monasteries, the Vespers service marked the beginning of the evening, a communal chant in dim chapels. Hygiene before sleep was minimal, a quick washing of face and hands, sometimes a comb through the hair. Preparing the bed was a shared task. Blankets were fluffed, chamber pots checked, and for those wealthy enough, a servant might draw curtains to keep out drafts and prying eyes. Evening was also a time of caution. Fear of thieves, wild animals, or evil spirits kept many alert. Windows might be shuttered, doors bolted, holy symbols placed near entrances. And as night fully descended, people tucked themselves into their rough beds, still vulnerable to cold, pests, and dreams, but with hope. Hope that the night would pass peacefully. As the village sleeps under a blanket of stars, and the moon casts pale silver light over thatched roofs and cobblestone streets, the medieval night holds a solemn secret. While most souls surrender to sleep's embrace, a select few awaken for a higher purpose. The midnight watch, a sacred vigil between the living and the unseen. The monastic midnight office. Inside the stone walls of monasteries, the deep stillness is broken only by the soft murmur of chanting voices. Here, the monks rise from their narrow straw pallets, their footsteps muffled on cold flagstones. Cloaked in heavy habits against the chill, they gather in dimly lit chapels for the midnight office, or matins, a key moment in the cycle of canonical hours. The air is thick with incense smoke, swirling around the flickering candlelight. The chants, haunting, melodic, fill the vaulted ceilings. Vigilate et orate, any entreatus in temptationem. Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. This sacred time is not just prayer but spiritual warfare, a stand against the encroaching darkness that medieval people believed was populated by demons, spirits, and restless souls. The monks' voices rise and fall, each phrase a shield and a plea for protection. Between verses, silence deepens, heavy, reverent. Every whisper, every breath, is part of an ancient rhythm connecting heaven and earth. For the monks, this vigil was both sacrifice and devotion, a way to keep their souls vigilant when the rest of the world was vulnerable. The town watchman's duty. Beyond the monastery, the village itself is not without guardians. In towns and castles, night watchmen patrol the narrow streets, their torches sputtering against the damp air. Clad in leather and chain mail, they carry halberds or wooden staffs, eyes sharp for any sign of danger. Their job is perilous and thankless, keeping watch against thieves, arsonists, or wild animals that might threaten the fragile peace of the night. Occasionally, their sharp cries or the ringing of a bell shatter the silence, a warning or an alarm. For common folk, the night is a time of vulnerability. Doors are bolted, windows shuttered, and locks checked twice. But in the absence of modern security, fears of evil spirits and supernatural dangers are just as potent as worries of human threat. Household nighttime rituals. Inside the humble homes, families huddle beneath rough blankets. But before sleep, prayers are a vital ritual. Most families recited the Pater Noster, our Father, the Ave Maria, Hail Mary, or other simple prayers taught by priests. These prayers were believed to form a protective barrier against nightmares, illness, and evil forces. Many kept holy relics or sacred objects close by: a small wooden cross, a piece of blessed bread, or a sprig of rosemary hung near the door to keep away malevolent spirits. In some regions, superstitions flourished. Placing a knife under the pillow or a bowl of salt by the bedside was thought to guard the sleeper. The medieval mind was steeped in the supernatural, and the night was the time when the boundary between the natural and the supernatural thinned. The midnight hour, a time of fear and faith. Midnight itself held deep significance. It was often called the witching hour, a time when the veil between worlds was thinnest and when evil forces were believed to be most active. Folklore told of spirits roaming freely, witches gathering in secret, and restless souls seeking vengeance or release. Yet despite this fear, faith was the strongest shield. Belief in God's protection, the power of prayer, and the intercession of saints offered comfort against the darkness. People clung to their rituals, lighting candles, saying their prayers, crossing themselves before sleep. In the cold and quiet of the night, the medieval world was both fragile and fierce, a place where the unseen battles raged alongside the waking world. Night in the medieval village was anything but silent. Though the sun had long disappeared beneath the horizon and shutters had been drawn tight against the creeping dark, The world remained alive with its own quiet symphony, a collection of sounds so subtle, so strange, that they stirred something deep in the soul. The thick stillness of night was broken first by the wind, gentle, steady, and soft as it passed through the bare limbs of twisted trees near the edge of the forest. Its breath slipped across the roofs of thatched cottages, causing the straw to rustle and shift like whispers passing from house to house. To those lying awake in their straw-stuffed beds, the wind could sound like a woman humming, or a child crying, or something else. From the branches above, an owl called out into the darkness. "To it, to who?" Its haunting voice echoed between the walls of the sleeping village. To modern ears, it might seem harmless, even beautiful. But to a medieval mind, such a sound was an omen, a herald of death, a warning from the spirit world. Many villagers believed that to hear the owl's call was to be marked. It was not uncommon for an old man to cross himself, whispering a quick prayer, or for a mother to hold her infant more tightly, murmuring a protective verse beneath her breath. In the animal stalls, movement stirred. A cow let out a low, guttural moan, its breath steaming in the cold. Pigs grunted in their pens. Somewhere, a goat kicked at a wooden wall. Even in the depths of night, the barnyard was restless. Rats scurried along the rafters, their sharp claws tapping like skeletal fingers over dry timber. The cats, half domesticated, slinked through the shadows, chasing after those scurrying tails, their eyes gleaming like green lanterns in the gloom. But not all sounds came from animals. From time to time, a door creaked open. Not fully, just a crack, just enough for someone to slip out into the cold. Perhaps to relieve themselves in the outhouse, a crude wooden shed perched over a pit in the corner of the yard. Or perhaps for something else. A meeting, a secret, a need. Footsteps pressed softly into the frost-hardened earth. Crunch. Pause. Crunch again. Inside, the sleepers heard it. Even in dreams, the mind clung to sound. Was it the wind? Or something walking? In wealthier homes, even the fire spoke, the logs groaned as they cooled, splitting gently with sudden cracks that echoed through the hall. The iron kettle hissed a little as its last warmth faded. Shadows from the dying flame danced on the stone walls like pale ghosts performing an ageless ritual. And in the deep of night, in that strange gap between first sleep and second, there were voices. Whispers. From the next room. From the street outside. From the mind. Not loud. Never loud. Just enough to make the sleeper stir. Was it someone speaking? Or only a dream? Hard to say. And above it all, in the distance, a bell sometimes tolled. A slow, deep, resonant sound. One chime. Maybe two. No more. Perhaps it came from the monastery, where monks rose from their sleep to pray in the sacred hours. Or perhaps it rang for a soul just departed. The medieval night was not silent. It breathed, it whispered, it watched. And the sleeper, nestled under rough wool blankets, on straw-stuffed mattresses, in the wooden skeleton of a home, slept not in isolation, but in a world alive with presence. Sound guided the rhythm of rest. And fear, wonder, and habit lulled the village back into uneasy dreams. The wind had softened. The owls had quieted. And within the cottage, the first sleep was over. As the embers pulsed gently in the hearth, life began to stir once more, not in daylight's rush, but in the slow, drowsy rhythm of midnight wakefulness. This was the watch, that strange space between two sleeps, when the mind hovered between dreams and duty, and the body remembered its needs. The chamber pot. Before bed, nearly every home, rich or poor, had a vessel placed discreetly beneath the bed frame or in a corner behind a curtain. The chamber pot was as ordinary as a spoon, yet always a little shameful. It was made of ceramic or metal, sometimes even wood. Some were plain, others decorated with cheerful glazes to distract from their purpose. But all served the same task. A child might wake first, squirming under rough wool blankets, whispering a plea to their mother or older sister. The pot would be pulled out with care, its scraping sound unmistakable on the wooden floorboards. The room would grow still again as privacy was offered or ignored. The act was never glamorous, but it was necessary, and done in silence, save for a yawn or a sleepy cough. In noble households, Servants would discreetly collect the pots before dawn, carrying them through shadowy corridors, past tapestries and stone staircases, to be emptied into designated pits or the running channel below the garderobe. But for the villagers, the contents might wait until morning, covered with cloth or lid to spare the nose. Nightshirts and woolen layers. Night in the Middle Ages was not merely dark, it was cold. Bitterly so in winter, and always cool even in summer, especially in stone homes where the walls never truly warmed. To sleep meant to prepare the body like one would a battlefield. Layers were everything. Men wore long nightshirts, usually old tunics softened by years of wear. Women slept in chemises, often belted loosely at the waist, with head wraps or coifs to protect warmth. Children were bundled in the hand-me-downs of older siblings, wrapped tight like roots in burlap. And then came the wool. Coarse, itchy, and dependable. Heavy cloaks, sheepskins, and patched quilts layered over every form. Some used straw-stuffed mattresses, others simple woven mats on the floor, but the covers were what mattered. Only the feet, it seemed, refused to stay warm. Cold feet were the great curse of medieval sleep. Some tried woolen socks, others heated stones by the fire, wrapped them in cloth, and slid them under their bedding. In abbeys, nuns slept fully clothed in their habits, and even then, a whispered complaint of cold toes might echo down the cloister. A warm bed, even more than a full belly, was a sign of modest comfort. Those who slept with others, spouse, siblings, parents, shared more than dreams. They shared heat, body against body, breath against neck. The night was survived not alone, but together. Creatures beneath the blanket. But not all bedfellows were welcome. Fleas and lice were an unspoken presence, more common than not. Blankets, rarely washed, carried the memories of weeks or months, sometimes years. Scratching was a quiet, accepted ritual, done with dignity, if done at all. Some sprinkled ashes between the sheets as a deterrent. Others laid fresh herbs, lavender if lucky, pennyroyal or wormwood if desperate. And beneath the bed, or near the hearth, a dog might curl into a tight circle. A barn cat, if permitted, might sprawl like royalty at the foot. Their purring was more comforting than any saint's relic. The second sleep awaits. Once the pot had been used, the covers readjusted, and the cold fought back again, the room sank once more into silence. Eyes closed, but the mind lingered. Sometimes prayers were whispered. Sometimes wool was mended or dreams were written into memory. Sometimes, beneath the blankets, the warmth of a nearby body led to quiet intimacy, a moment of closeness not bound by schedule or sunlight. And then, slowly, the second sleep began. As the night deepened into its quietest hours, when the village lay in a slumber both restless and deep, the sleeper's mind slipped beyond the fragile veil of reality into a shadowy world of dreams. But these were no ordinary dreams. For medieval souls, dreams were messengers, ambassadors between the earthly and the divine, the living and the dead, the known and the unknowable. The power of dreams. To a medieval person, dreams carried great weight. They were not just images or fleeting thoughts, but signs from God or portents of fate. A dream could reveal hidden truths, warn of impending disaster, or provide guidance. Priests, monks, and even lay people often kept dream journals, writing down vivid visions and interpreting their meanings according to centuries-old traditions. Yet dreams could also deceive. The line between sacred messages and sinister trickery was thin. It was believed that demons and evil spirits roamed freely in the night, eager to mislead souls through false visions and frightening apparitions. These dark visitors were said to enter homes through cracks and chimneys, seeking to disturb the peace of the innocent and the guilty alike. The incubi and succubi. Among the most feared nightmares were the visitations of the incubus and succubus, male and female demons that preyed on sleepers, especially at the vulnerable moments between waking and dreaming. These spirits would sit upon the chest of the victim, pressing down with crushing weight, causing suffocation and paralysis. The terror of this paralysis was often explained as an evil spirit's grip on the soul, an attempt to steal life itself. Victims described feelings of heavy pressure, the inability to cry out, and visions of monstrous shapes hovering nearby. In a world without medical understanding, these experiences were terrifying proof that the night was a battleground between good and evil. Defenses against the night. To protect themselves, medieval people developed a rich tapestry of rituals and objects designed to ward off the darkness. Blessed crosses hung above beds or on walls, their sacred power believed to repel evil. Herbs such as sage, rosemary, and vervain were hung in bundles or burned as incense, their scents thought to cleanse the air and keep spirits at bay. Some kept holy water nearby, sprinkled on pillows or threshold stones. Candles, often blessed by priests, were lit before sleep, their flickering flames a fragile barrier against the encroaching shadows. Loud noises, singing, or prayer were used to banish spirits that might linger. In monasteries and convents, monks and nuns took extra precautions, holding night vigils, extended prayers during the dark hours to protect the community from demonic influence. The haunted mind. Sleep itself could be a terrifying ordeal. The boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred, and many woke drenched in sweat or trembling with fear. Some would see shadowy figures standing at the foot of the bed, or the ghostly faces of lost loved ones, reaching out with silent pleas. Dreams of death, war, famine, or lost children haunted the minds of many, reflecting the harsh realities of medieval life. These visions often lingered even after waking, coloring the day with anxiety and sorrow. The fear of never waking. Perhaps the greatest fear was the fear of not waking at all. Death was a constant presence in medieval life, stalking the streets in the form of plagues, accidents, and violence. Sleep was sometimes called the little death, and many believed that the boundary between life and death was thinnest in the hours of darkness. This fear shaped many bedtime rituals. Family members might place a hand on the sleeper's chest, feeling for breath for life. Names would be whispered softly to call the soul back should it wander. Coins were sometimes placed beneath pillows, a talisman to pay the ferryman if the sleeper's spirit crossed too soon. In some regions, a bell would be tolled softly at night, a reminder of mortality, but also a prayer for safe passage. Despite these fears, sleep was necessary. It restored strength, healed wounds, and refreshed the spirit for the trials of the coming day. And so, in the flickering candlelight of medieval chambers, with crosses above and herbs hanging near, the villagers surrendered themselves to the night, to dreams, to demons, and to the fragile hope of waking once more. As the darkest hours of the night stretched onward, the village lay in stillness, but sleep was far from peaceful for many. In the quiet chambers and drafty halls, a profound ritual unfolded, one of watchfulness, protection, and deep-seated faith. This was the vigil of the night, a time when both body and spirit were guarded against the many dangers of darkness. The watchers of the night. In wealthier households, it was common to have a night watchman or servant who stayed awake, patrolling corridors or sitting by the hearth, listening for sounds that might signal danger. This practice stemmed not only from practical concerns, the threat of thieves, fires, or wild animals, but from spiritual fears as well. Even in simple homes, family members took turns keeping vigil. A parent might remain awake while others slept, whispering prayers or softly humming hymns to maintain a protective aura. The act of staying awake was seen as a sacred duty, a small, human rebellion against the threatening unknown that prowled outside and within. Prayers and incantations. Before retiring to bed, many would recite prayers or incantations meant to shield the sleeper's soul. The Lord's Prayer was common, but there were also more obscure, local blessings handed down through generations. These words were thought to form a spiritual barrier, keeping out malice and ill will. Some believed that singing or softly chanting specific psalms could drive away nightmares or ward off evil spirits lurking in the shadows. These vocal rituals, though simple, were powerful acts of faith, weaving protection into the very fabric of the night. Sacred objects and symbols. Across medieval Europe, certain objects were widely used as talismans against the dark. The crucifix, prominently displayed near beds, was more than decoration. It was a symbol of divine protection. People also carried holy relics, small fragments of saints' bones or items believed to have miraculous powers. In addition, the use of candles had deep significance. A single candle burning through the night was believed to be a beacon of light that would prevent evil spirits from entering the home. The act of lighting and maintaining this flame was a vigil in itself, a fragile yet vital defense. The role of the church. The church was central to medieval sleep rituals. Monks and priests conducted night prayers in abbeys, praying for the safety of their flock. The ringing of church bells late at night was both a call to prayer and a spiritual alarm against approaching harm. For many peasants, visits to the church before bed to receive a blessing were customary. They would seek the protection of saints through prayer, offering candles or small donations in exchange for divine favor and peaceful sleep. The blurring of worlds. The medieval night was a threshold, a liminal space where the physical world met the supernatural. The line between waking and sleeping blurred, and so did the line between the living and the dead. Some believed that souls wandered freely during the night, seeking rest or redemption. Others feared the presence of witches or malevolent spirits who could curse or haunt the sleeping. These beliefs gave rise to countless stories and customs, like placing iron objects under the pillow to repel witches or drawing protective symbols on doors. Night as a time of transformation. In this world of uncertainty and mystery, the night was not merely a time to rest, but a time to confront fears, to protect what was most precious, and to seek solace in faith and ritual. To sleep was to surrender temporarily to a world beyond human control, yet the rituals of the vigil offered a way to hold the darkness at bay. In the medieval mind, the night sky was not just a backdrop of stars, it was a living map of divine influence. The moon, in particular, held a powerful sway over the rhythms of life and sleep, believed to govern everything from emotions to health, and even fate itself. The moon's mystical influence. Medieval people closely observed the phases of the moon, linking its waxing and waning cycles to human behavior. It was widely believed that the moon could affect sleep patterns, bringing restless nights during the full moon and peaceful slumber during the new moon. Many villagers timed important tasks according to the lunar calendar, planting crops, harvesting herbs, and even choosing the best nights for medical treatments or childbirth. The moon's glow was also thought to enhance the power of dreams, making certain nights especially charged with prophetic visions or spiritual encounters. Astrology and nighttime portents. Astrology was deeply interwoven with medieval spirituality. Scholars, monks, and even laypeople consulted celestial charts to interpret the will of the heavens. The positions of the stars and planets at the hour of falling asleep were believed to influence one's destiny and the nature of one's dreams. Special horoscopes were cast for the night, guiding people on how to prepare for sleep, what to expect in their dreams, and how to protect themselves from ill fortune. Some believed that certain stars were homes to angels or demons, guardians or tempters influencing the sleeper's soul. Nighttime divination practices. Beyond astrology, many engaged in nighttime divination rituals, seeking to glimpse the future through dreams or omens. Practices varied from simple methods, like placing a Bible under the pillow or falling asleep with a piece of iron to ward off evil, to more complex rituals involving herbs, incantations, and sacred symbols. Dreams were recorded and interpreted by wise women and learned clerics alike, becoming an important part of personal and communal decision-making. A troubling dream might prompt prayers, fasting, or pilgrimage, while a favorable vision could inspire hope and action. The moonlight's dual nature. The moonlight was often seen as a gentle guide through darkness. It also carried a more dangerous reputation. Full moon nights were believed to be moments when the boundary between the worlds thinned, allowing spirits, ghosts, and otherworldly creatures to roam freely. The werewolf legends, common in medieval folklore, tied the transformation of man to beast directly to the full moon's eerie glow. Such beliefs added to the night's aura of mystery and peril, making sleep a gamble between safety and supernatural encounter. Practical effects on sleep. From a practical standpoint, moonlight could be both friend and foe. On bright nights, the glow filtering through windows might disrupt sleep, causing wakefulness or vivid dreams. Conversely, the absence of moonlight on darker nights encouraged deeper, more restorative rest. In rural communities without artificial light, the moon often marked the passage of time during the night, its presence a natural clock to rise with the dawn or maintain the night vigil. In medieval times, the night was often seen as a time when the body and soul were most vulnerable, not only to spiritual forces, but also to physical ailments. Illnesses that flared up after sunset were thought to carry special significance, and the night was filled with rituals aimed at protection and healing. The night as a time of weakness. Without modern medicine, people believed that many diseases worsened during the night because the darkness allowed evil spirits or bad humors to attack the body. Fever, chills, and convulsions were especially feared after sunset, interpreted as signs that malevolent forces were at work. Because of this, family members stayed vigilant, watching over the sick through the night. They whispered prayers, sprinkled holy water, and used protective charms to shield their loved ones from spiritual harm. Herbal remedies and nighttime potions. Herbalists and healers prepared special remedies to be administered at night. Certain plants like valerian root, chamomile, and lavender were prized for their calming and sleep-inducing properties. These herbs were brewed into teas or burned as incense to soothe the restless. Some concoctions were designed to guard against night terrors and to protect the sleeper's soul. The brewing and use of these remedies often involved ritualized steps, blessings, specific timings tied to lunar phases, and the use of consecrated water. The role of prayer and faith. Healing at night was as much spiritual as physical. Monks, priests, and holy women were called upon to pray over the sick, invoking saints known for their healing powers. The use of relics, fragments of saintly bones or objects, was common, as it was believed these carried divine energy that could drive out sickness. People also turned to pilgrimage for cures, sometimes undertaking dangerous journeys to distant shrines, hoping that prayer at the tomb of a saint would bring relief. These acts of faith were seen as essential supplements to any physical treatment. Nighttime vigil for the ill. Families often kept a night vigil beside the bedside of a sick loved one, a solemn watch that combined care, prayer, and protection. This vigil was more than a practical measure. It was an act of love and spiritual devotion, believed to help the sick person's soul find peace and healing. The vigil might include singing hymns, reading scripture, or simply holding the hand of the sufferer, offering comfort amid the fear of death and the unknown. When the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness enveloped the medieval village, the world transformed into a realm of mystery and whispers. The silence of the day gave way to a symphony of nocturnal sounds, each carrying a meaning, a warning, or a secret message from the unseen world. The night as a living entity. To medieval people, the night was not merely the absence of light. It was alive, breathing, and watching. The noises that rose from the shadows were part of this living darkness, a language spoken by animals, spirits, and the restless dead. The hoot of an owl, slicing through the stillness, was among the most feared sounds. In many villages, an owl's call was believed to foretell death or misfortune, a messenger between this world and the next. Hearing an owl near your home could send chills down the spine, prompting hurried prayers and the lighting of extra candles. Wolves and the howl of danger. In the wild outskirts, the howl of wolves pierced the night. These predators were both real threats and symbols of the unknown. Their eerie cries were often thought to herald the gathering of evil forces or the presence of witches riding the night air. Some villagers believed wolves could be transformed humans, cursed souls trapped between worlds. Farmers guarded their livestock with fear during such nights, knowing that the dark woods held both natural predators and supernatural dangers. The sound of wolves was a reminder that the night was a perilous time, where the boundaries between safety and threat blurred. Household noises and spirits. Within the home, ordinary sounds took on extraordinary meaning. A creaking floorboard, the rustling of a curtain, or soft footsteps in the hall could be signs of ghosts or spirits wandering unseen. Many households reported mysterious noises that could not be explained, whispers in empty rooms, the sudden slam of a door, or faint laughter echoing through the dark. Such occurrences were often attributed to restless souls, trapped between life and death, or to mischievous spirits sent to unsettle the living. These beliefs led to rituals designed to soothe or repel these entities, prayers said at the bedside, the placing of salt or iron near thresholds, and the burning of protective herbs like sage or rosemary, bells, charms, and iron. To guard against the frightening sounds of night, villagers used various protective charms and rituals. Small bells were hung near doors and windows, their ringing believed to scatter evil spirits and break enchantments. The sound of a bell was a beacon of order and holiness in the chaotic night. Iron, considered a powerful repellent to supernatural forces, was fashioned into horseshoes and nails and placed strategically around the home. Above doors, a well-positioned horseshoe was thought to create a protective barrier, preventing witches or spirits from crossing the threshold. People carried iron keys or knives under their pillows for similar protection. The tactile presence of iron offered a small comfort, a shield against the invisible threats whispered about in the dark. The mysterious night animals. Animals that thrived in the night were wrapped in folklore and fear. The black cat, with its glowing eyes and silent steps, was perhaps the most infamous. Many believed black cats to be witches' familiars, magical companions who aided in sorcery. To see a black cat crossing your path after dark could mean ill luck or be a sign that the supernatural was near. In contrast, dogs were celebrated as guardians. Their sharp hearing and loyalty made them valued protectors against unseen forces. A dog's bark in the dead of night was both a warning and a comfort, reassuring villagers that someone or something was alert and watching. The heavy silence in the thin veil. Yet among all these sounds, there was a profound and heavy silence that cloaked the medieval night. This stillness was not empty but pregnant with possibility, the quiet before a spectral visitation, the hush in which a prayer could be heard by heaven. It was during this silence that people felt the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. The boundary between worlds blurred, allowing spirits to walk freely and souls to wander. In this liminal space, sleep was a fragile state, and dreams were messages from beyond. The night sounds, whether eerie or benign, were reminders of the unseen forces that shaped medieval life, forces that demanded respect, fear, and constant vigilance. As the sun set and the medieval world plunged into darkness, a unique and vital group of individuals took on the solemn duty of guarding the community, the Night Watchers. These men and sometimes women were the protectors who stood vigil while the rest of the village or town slept, ready to defend against dangers both seen and unseen that prowled the night. The purpose and responsibility of the Night Watch. The Night Watch was a long-standing institution born from necessity. Medieval towns, with their wooden houses, narrow streets, and crowded marketplaces, were vulnerable to theft, arson, and attack. The cover of darkness emboldened thieves, bandits, and wild animals. To safeguard their homes and families, villagers organized watch groups that would patrol the streets, city walls, and outskirts through the cold, quiet hours. These watchmen bore heavy responsibility. They were expected to be alert at all times, to listen carefully for any unusual sounds, a breaking window, suspicious footsteps, or the telltale clamor of an attempted break-in. They patrolled with purpose, their eyes adjusting to the gloom, their ears sharpened to every creak and whisper. Tools of the Night Watch. The watchmen carried a variety of tools and weapons, modest by modern standards but effective in their context. Wooden staffs, sharpened poles, and heavy clubs were common, used to fend off thieves or fend off wild animals such as wolves or stray dogs. Spears and simple swords were carried in some wealthier or more organized towns. Beyond weapons, they also carried symbols of spiritual protection. Crosses, small holy relics, and blessed charms were often worn or kept close to ward off evil spirits, witches, or demons, figures that were as feared as any human threat. Many believed that the night was a time when the spiritual world overlapped with the mortal, making these symbols necessary for safety. Lanterns and torches provided a flickering circle of light in the darkness, acting as beacons that both guided the watchmen and warned would-be intruders of their presence. The iron and glass lanterns were sturdy and designed to keep the flame alive against night winds, casting shadows that danced ominously on stone walls and timber-framed houses. The watchman and the supernatural. The medieval night was not just dangerous because of human criminals. It was a time steeped in superstition and fear of supernatural forces. Witchcraft was a persistent worry, and rumors of witches flying across the night sky or holding dark Sabbaths in the woods caused panic and suspicion. Night watchers were sometimes charged with keeping an eye out for these gatherings. On nights when moonlight revealed strange figures or when townspeople reported unnatural noises, cackles, chanting, or unearthly music, the watch might organize patrols into nearby forests or fields to disperse suspected witches or evil spirits. In some regions, the watch was intertwined with local clergy or healers who provided blessings before patrols began, imbuing the men with spiritual strength to resist demonic forces. Enforcing curfews and social order. The night watch also played an important role in maintaining social order. Curfews were common in medieval towns, where everyone was expected to be indoors after sunset unless they had a valid reason to be outside. Watchmen enforced these curfews, challenging late-night wanderers, and escorting travelers or suspicious individuals to local authorities. This helped prevent brawls, thefts, and public disturbances, maintaining a fragile peace under the cover of darkness. Community and duty. In smaller villages, the night watch was often a communal responsibility, rotated among able-bodied men or respected elders. This system built a sense of collective duty and mutual protection. Everyone understood that their safety depended on the vigilance of their neighbors. Stories and songs celebrating the bravery of watchmen were common. Around hearth fires, tales of night watchmen confronting ghosts, driving off wolves, or catching thieves were told and retold. These stories blended history and myth, inspiring courage and respect for those who faced the terrors of the night head-on. Challenges and hardships. The night watch was not an easy duty. Long hours of cold, darkness, and loneliness tested the resolve of even the toughest men. The risk of attack by bandits or wild animals was real, and the psychological toll of constant vigilance against invisible threats weighed heavily. Many watchmen carried talismans or sought prayers before starting their rounds, hoping for protection. Yet despite the dangers and fears, the watchman remained steadfast, a living symbol of human determination to conquer fear through courage and duty. In the medieval world, the arrival of night was not merely a passage from day to darkness, but a profound transition enveloped in rituals, customs, and deeply held beliefs. How people prepared for sleep, what they ate before bed, and the actions they took in the dim hours were laden with meaning aimed at protecting body, mind, and soul during the vulnerable hours when the veil between the natural and supernatural was believed to be thinnest. The final meal, nourishment and comfort. For most medieval households, the last meal before bedtime was intentionally simple, modest, and often eaten shortly before dusk. This meal, sometimes called the late supper, was more than just physical sustenance. It was a calming act that eased the transition into rest. The contents varied by season, region, and social status. In rural villages, this meal might consist of coarse brown bread, thick slices of hard cheese, and a bowl of pottage, a thick, hearty stew made of root vegetables, beans, and occasionally small pieces of salted meat or fish. Wealthier families could afford more variety, adding stewed fruits, honeyed cakes, or spiced ale. For many, a warm drink was a nightly comfort. Herbal teas brewed from lavender, chamomile, valerian root, or mint were treasured for their reputed calming properties. These herbs were believed not only to relax the body, but to keep away restless spirits and nightmares. In some areas, a small cup of mulled wine or spiced ale was also customary, serving as both a soothing drink and a mild sedative. Preparing the bedchamber, sanctuary of rest and protection. The bedchamber was carefully prepared, as the night was a time of vulnerability. Beds were valuable possessions, sometimes shared by entire families, and were often located in multi-purpose rooms. A typical medieval bed was a wooden frame stuffed with straw or rushes and topped with a thick wool or feather mattress. Warm blankets or animal skins were added for insulation against the cold. Before nightfall, the household would freshen the bed, shaking out the straw mattress, fluffing the blankets, and sometimes spreading fragrant herbs like rosemary, thyme, or lavender on the linens to promote restful sleep and repel insects or evil influences. Many homes had amulets or charms placed near or above the bed. These included iron nails, believed to drive away evil spirits, sprigs of garlic, a potent ward against witches and vampires in folk belief, and small crosses or religious relics, which called upon divine protection. A broomstick might be hung or placed near the door. A superstition suggested that witches could not enter a home where a broom was present, or that it would sweep away any lingering evil. Light in the darkness, the candle and the flame. Though lighting was minimal, the flicker of a candle or oil lamp was essential. A small candle, often made from tallow, beeswax, or rushes soaked in fat, was lit to provide a soft glow. The flame symbolized warmth, life, and protection against the unknown lurking outside. Extinguishing the candle was a cautious act. Sudden extinguishing by a draft or unexpected event was taken as a bad omen, possibly indicating the approach of evil spirits or ill fortune. Many households practiced a deliberate ritual to snuff out flames gently, sometimes accompanied by a whispered prayer. Spirituality before sleep, prayer and blessing. Prayer was integral to the bedtime routine. The head of the household typically led a prayer, asking for God's protection over the family and peaceful dreams free from evil. Psalms or short blessings were common, and the Bible or prayer book might be left open on a bedside table or hung on the wall. In some homes, holy water was sprinkled around the bed or doorways to purify the space. Clergy occasionally blessed the beds or homes, especially in times of illness or fear, reinforcing faith as a powerful shield against nightly terrors. Nightmares and night terrors, battling the unseen. Medieval people frequently struggled with nightmares, sleep paralysis, and night terrors, phenomena that they explained through a spiritual lens. These disturbing experiences were often attributed to the devil's work, malevolent spirits, or the pressure of witchcraft. To combat these, folk remedies abounded. Placing knives or scissors under the pillow was believed to cut through bad dreams. Hanging garlic cloves or iron objects near the bed repelled witches and evil eyes. Reciting prayers, especially the Lord's Prayer, was thought to protect the soul during sleep. Families might also leave a piece of bread or salt nearby to placate restless spirits or ensure good dreams. The mysterious second sleep. Medieval nights were typically divided into two distinct sleeping phases. The first sleep began shortly after dusk and lasted several hours, followed by a waking period lasting an hour or more, and then a second sleep until dawn. During the waking period, people might rise to tend to chores, smoke a pipe, pray, or quietly converse with family members. This segmented sleep was a natural human rhythm, allowing time for reflection, social interaction, or spiritual meditation. Some historians suggest that this second sleep was the norm before the advent of modern artificial lighting, reflecting a very different relationship to night and rest. The medieval night was alive with sounds, some soothing, some unsettling, forming a unique soundscape that shaped how people experienced sleep. Unlike the modern quiet of insulated bedrooms, the medieval home and village were permeated with the ambient noises of nature, human activity, and mysterious forces. Understanding this auditory environment reveals how deeply connected medieval people were to their surroundings, and how those sounds influenced their dreams, fears, and rituals. The natural night symphony. Long before artificial lighting and soundproofing, the countryside and towns rang with natural nocturnal sounds. The soft rustling of wine through the trees, the chirping of crickets, and the distant hoot of owls created a backdrop that was both calming and eerie. In rural areas, the crackling of hearth fires in nearby homes mingled with the occasional bark of a dog, the lowing of cattle settling in their stalls, or the snorts and breaths of horses in the stable. These familiar sounds reassured villagers that life continued. even after sunset. The night sky was often alive with the calls of nocturnal birds, owls, nightjars, and other species, their mysterious hoots and trills often linked with superstition. The owl, in particular, was seen as a harbinger of death or misfortune in some regions, adding a chilling note to the night's natural chorus. Human voices in the night. Medieval nights were not silent. In towns and villages, the clatter of a late returning traveler's horse, the muffled voices of those gathered for late prayers, or the rhythmic pounding of a mill's wheel over the river's flow blended into the nighttime soundscape. The night watch's call, often a shouted warning or the striking of a wooden rattle or bell, punctuated the darkness. This sound was a signal both to townsfolk and to potential troublemakers that vigilance remained strong despite the late hour. Sometimes, faint music or singing drifted from taverns or homes where celebrations continued into the night. These sounds brought warmth and community but could also stir unrest or jealousy. The sounds of fear and superstition. Not all nocturnal noises were comforting. Strange, unexplained sounds stirred fear and suspicion. Whispers, footsteps with no source, the eerie creak of shutters or doors, and sudden gusts of wind were all interpreted as signs of supernatural activity. In the collective imagination, such sounds heralded visits from spirits, witches, or demons. Stories abounded of night hags, spectral figures said to sit on the chest of sleepers, causing bad dreams or sleep paralysis. These experiences were terrifying and difficult to explain. To counter these fears, families employed rituals, knocking on wood to ward off evil, placing bells by the bedside to ring and scare spirits away, or singing holy hymns to drown out sinister sounds. The role of prayers and chanting. In many households, the night was filled with the murmur of prayer. Individuals might recite the Pater Noster, Our Father, Ave Maria, Hail Mary, or other sacred texts softly as they prepared for sleep. Monasteries, castles, and some towns maintained nighttime vigils or chanting, creating a continuous spiritual shield across the community. These prayers were believed to purify the air, protect souls, and maintain divine favor. Even those less pious often found comfort in these rituals, their voices blending with the night's natural and supernatural chorus. The impact on sleep patterns and dreams. The rich and sometimes unsettling soundscape influenced medieval sleep deeply. The frequent interruptions, the two-phase sleep pattern with a wakeful period, and the persistent fears shaped how people dreamed and rested. Dreams were taken seriously, often interpreted as messages or warnings. A nightmare might be seen as a visitation by spirits or a sign of impending danger, prompting rituals upon waking to cleanse the soul. The waking period between first and second sleep was often spent reflecting on dreams, discussing them with family, or performing prayers to influence future dreams and guard against evil. The practical side, dealing with noise. Despite the fears, practical steps were taken to manage noise. Houses were built with thick walls of stone or timber to block out some sound. Heavy curtains or tapestries dampened drafts and muffled street noises. Families shared beds not only for warmth but also to provide companionship against the unsettling loneliness that the night could bring. Pets such as dogs and cats were also kept close, their presence a deterrent to both animals and spirits. Sleep in the medieval era was not merely a physical rest, but a doorway to a mysterious realm where the mind wandered freely, and the boundaries between the natural and supernatural blurred. Dreams held profound significance. They were messages, warnings, and sometimes even prophecies. The medieval understanding of dreams. Medieval people believed dreams were sent by divine or demonic forces. Good dreams might be gifts from God or angels, offering guidance or reassurance. Conversely, nightmares were often seen as attacks from the devil, witches, or evil spirits aiming to disturb the soul's rest. This dual nature of dreams made them deeply feared and revered. Many would wake trembling after a nightmare, unsure if they had merely slept poorly or been spiritually assaulted. Dream interpretation and its role. Interpreting dreams was a serious practice. Clergy, scholars, and even common folk consulted dream books, texts that explained the meanings behind various dream symbols and scenarios. These guides offered explanations like, seeing a white dove foretold peace, Dreaming of fire suggested purification or destruction. Encountering a black dog might warn of illness. People also sought out local wise women or monks for advice on troubling dreams, hoping to learn how to protect themselves. Rituals to influence dreams. Because of the power attributed to dreams, medieval sleepers performed rituals to ensure good visions and prevent nightmares. Prayers before sleep, especially the Our Father and Hail Mary, were common protective tools. Some placed talismans or religious icons under their pillows or beside their beds to ward off evil. Others slept with holy water sprinkled on the linens or wore amulets infused with sacred prayers. Nightmares, the incubus, and sleep paralysis. Night terrors were often personified as a demon called the incubus, a malevolent spirit said to sit on the sleeper's chest, suffocating them and bringing terrifying visions. Sleep paralysis, a modern medical phenomenon, was unknowingly explained through these supernatural beliefs. Victims described feeling an invisible force holding them down, unable to move or scream. This experience terrified medieval people and led to a rich folklore around the incubus and other night demons. Dreams as portals to the otherworld. Some medieval traditions held that dreams allowed the soul to leave the body briefly and visit other realms, heavenly places, purgatory, or even the underworld. Shamans, mystics, and religious figures sometimes sought to enter trance-like states to journey spiritually during sleep. This belief further elevated the status of sleep as a sacred time of vulnerability and opportunity. The influence of night on creativity and healing. Dreams also inspired creativity. Poets, artists, and mystics claimed that their visions during sleep or the twilight hours brought them divine inspiration. Healing practices sometimes involved interpreting dreams to diagnose spiritual or physical ailments. Sleep's mysterious nature was thus woven into the very fabric of medieval culture, spirituality, and daily life. While modern bedrooms are often private sanctuaries designed solely for rest, the medieval bedroom was a multifunctional space, a place of sleep, work, socializing, and even display of status. Exploring how bedrooms were designed and used provides deep insight into medieval daily life and the cultural importance of sleep. The layout and furnishings. Medieval bedrooms varied widely depending on wealth and status, but most shared common features. Beds were often the centerpiece, large and ornate in castles, simpler and cozier in peasant homes. The wealthiest had canopy beds draped with heavy curtains of wool or velvet to block drafts and offer privacy. Curtains also muffled sound, creating a quieter sleep environment. Mattresses were filled with straw, feathers, or wool, depending on one's means. Feather mattresses were a luxury reserved for nobles. Chests and cupboards stored clothing, bedding, and valuables. Some chests were intricately carved or decorated, reflecting the owner's status. Floor coverings such as rushes or straw were common, serving as insulation and helping absorb dirt and moisture. The bedroom as a social space. Bedrooms were not strictly private. Visitors, family members, and servants often came and went, and beds were places for conversations, planning, and rest between work and meals. In noble households, the bedroom could be a place of political importance. Lords met with advisors or received guests there, and the presence of the bed symbolized hospitality and status. Lighting and heating. Without modern lighting, medieval bedrooms relied on candles, rushlights, or oil lamps. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on stone or wooden walls, adding both charm and a hint of eeriness. Heating was minimal. Large fireplaces were often in the main hall rather than bedrooms. Beds with heavy curtains and shared sleeping helped retain warmth. Privacy and separation. Privacy was a luxury. Shared beds, shared rooms, and thin walls meant little personal space. Noble families might have separate chambers, but servants and children often slept in the same room or nearby. In monasteries, dormitories were communal, with monks sleeping on simple pallets or straw mats. Bedrooms and health. Ventilation was poor, and crowded conditions often led to illness spreading easily. Still, The bedroom was a place of rest and recovery, where the sick and elderly spent much time. Herbs hung from rafters or placed near beds were believed to purify the air and ward off disease. In medieval Europe, the approach to sleep was not simply about physical rest but was deeply intertwined with spiritual practices and rituals designed to protect the sleeper's soul from harm. Night was a vulnerable time, when the boundary between the mortal world and the supernatural realm was believed to be thin. As such, many people followed specific nighttime rituals, combining prayer, symbolism, and protective actions to ensure a peaceful night and safe passage into the world of dreams. Preparing for sleep, the evening prayer. Before lying down to rest, it was common for families to gather for evening prayers. These prayers served both as a spiritual shield and a moment of communal bonding. The most frequently recited prayers were the Pater Noster, Our Father, and the Ave Maria, Hail Mary, believed to invoke divine protection. These prayers were often taught to children from a young age, and reciting them before sleep was ingrained as a habit. In noble households, chaplains or monks might lead these prayers aloud, filling the chamber with sacred words and chants that echoed softly through the stone walls. The significance of holy objects. Sleeping areas were often adorned with holy symbols, crucifixes, relics, holy water fonts, and small icons of saints. These objects were believed to guard against malevolent spirits and attract angelic protection. Many families kept small crosses or charms under pillows or tied around the wrist. Some slept with a Bible or prayer book nearby, ready to be consulted should a troubling dream arise. Rituals to ward off evil. Medieval people feared nocturnal demons, witches, and evil spirits that might enter during sleep. To guard against these threats, various rituals were practiced. Sprinkling holy water on bedding or around the room was a common practice, believed to sanctify the space and repel unholy entities. Knocking on wood or making the sign of the cross before sleep were simple, widespread acts intended to protect the sleeper. Lighting candles was both practical and symbolic. The soft light was thought to keep darkness, and the spirits it concealed, at bay. Some believed in placing iron objects, such as small knives or horseshoes, near the bed to fend off evil. Iron's mystical properties were widely accepted in folklore. The vigil between sleeps. Because many medieval people practiced segmented sleep, dividing the night into first sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between, this waking time was often filled with prayer or contemplation. During this vigil, individuals might reflect on the day's events and seek forgiveness for sins, recite additional prayers or psalms, discuss dreams and their meanings with family members, perform small chores or prepare for the following day. This period was considered especially potent for spiritual communication, as the world hung in quiet suspense. The role of monasteries and religious orders. Monastic communities had highly regimented sleep practices centered around prayer and discipline. The divine office or liturgy of the hours required monks to rise at night for prayer sessions, punctuating their rest with spiritual duties. Monks slept on simple straw pallets, often in communal dormitories, but their spiritual focus transformed sleep into a sacred act of obedience and devotion. Sleep and the afterlife. The medieval mindset closely linked sleep with death, viewing the two as parallel states. This analogy infused sleep with both comfort and fear. Nighttime prayers were not only for physical rest, but also for the safety of the soul's journey should death come during sleep. The hope was that peaceful sleep might lead to a peaceful death and a swift passage to heaven. In the medieval world, night was a time of profound contrast, a period of rest and vulnerability for most, yet a realm of heightened vigilance and danger for many. Darkness concealed threats both mundane and supernatural, making the presence of the night watch indispensable in towns, castles, and villages across Europe. These watchmen were the silent guardians of sleep, tasked with protecting the community from dangers that lurked beyond the hearth's warm glow. The origins and purpose of the night watch. The concept of a night watch emerged early in medieval urban life, as growing towns required organized protection against fires, theft, and unrest. Unlike the peaceful quiet of the countryside, towns and cities were crowded and combustible, their wooden houses tightly packed together. A single spark could ignite devastating flames, so watchmen's vigilance was critical. Their responsibilities extended far beyond fire prevention. Thieves, vagrants, and other criminals often exploited the cover of darkness to ply their illicit trades. The watchmen patrolled narrow alleys and open squares, their lanterns flickering like distant beacons against the blackness. By sounding horns, bells, or wooden clappers at regular intervals, the watchmen marked the passage of time, giving townsfolk a sense of security and order during the long, uncertain hours. The armor and arms of the watchmen. Although not full-time soldiers, many watchmen carried weapons for protection and deterrence. Swords, spears, or clubs were common, as were horns to raise alarms. Their clothing was typically dark, blending with the night to help them move unseen but ready to reveal themselves in a moment's notice. In some towns, watchmen wore simple badges or distinctive hats to identify themselves, lending authority to their calls and commands. Life and challenges on the night shift. The night watch was a difficult and often thankless duty. Watchmen faced the bitter cold, driving rain, or biting winter winds as they paced the walls or streets. The monotony of long hours was broken only by occasional disturbances, an alarm, a suspicious noise, or a sudden fire. Boredom bred stories and superstition. Watchmen whispered of ghostly apparitions seen in the flickering shadows, mysterious lights moving through the fog, or strange sounds that could not be explained. These tales spread among townsfolk, blending with local folklore to create an atmosphere where the line between reality and myth was thin. The castle guards, protecting lords and ladies. In castles, the night watch took on an even more crucial role. These fortified strongholds were strategic centers of power and thus prime targets for raids, sabotage, or espionage. Castle guards were typically trained soldiers, organized into rotating shifts to maintain vigilance 24 hours a day. Their posts on battlements and towers offered commanding views of the surrounding countryside, allowing them to spot approaching enemies or suspicious movements. The clang of armor, the cry of a sentry, and the waving of torches created a tense rhythm throughout the castle, underscoring the ever-present need for defense. Even within the safety of stone walls, sleep was punctuated by the sounds of watchmen performing their duties. Village night watches, community cooperation. In rural villages, organized night watches were less formal but no less vital. Villagers took turns patrolling streets and fields, especially during seasons when theft or wild animal attacks were more frequent. This communal effort fostered a deep sense of shared responsibility. Neighbors counted on one another's vigilance to safeguard crops, livestock, and families. The night watch thus became a social institution, reinforcing bonds and communal trust. Torches and lanterns cast long shadows as villagers walked in pairs or groups, voices low but watchful, ready to raise the alarm if danger appeared. Nighttime superstitions and spiritual protections. Darkness was believed to be inhabited by more than just criminals or wild beasts. Medieval superstition painted night as a time when witches, demons, and spirits roamed freely, seeking to harm the living. To counter these supernatural threats, townsfolk relied on a variety of protective measures. Salt, iron, and herbs. Scatterings of salt around doorways and windows were thought to cleanse spaces of evil. Iron objects like horseshoes or nails, believed to repel spirits, were hung near beds or entrances. Bundles of herbs such as rosemary and garlic were hung from beams or carried by watchmen. Prayer and holy symbols. The watchmen themselves might carry small crosses or prayer beads. Prayers were whispered or chanted to invoke divine protection during patrols. Churches sometimes tolled bells at night to ward off evil. Noise as a deterrent. Bells, drums, or wooden clappers were not only practical alarms but also served to scare away spirits believed to be frightened by sound. The psychological toll on watchmen. The solitude and darkness weighed heavily on watchmen's minds. The interplay of physical fatigue, isolation, and superstition bred anxiety and fear. Shadows seemed to shift into forms, noises echoed unnervingly, and the cold seeped deep into the bones. Yet the watchmen bore this burden silently, knowing their role was vital to the safety and order of their communities. Night watchmen in medieval literature and folklore. The night watchman appears frequently in medieval stories as a figure of quiet heroism or eerie mystery. Tales told of watchmen who confronted thieves, exposed conspiracies, or encountered spirits on lonely patrols. In some legends, they were granted supernatural insight or protection themselves, walking the night with courage fueled by faith and duty. As the dark velvet of night slowly faded into the first pale hues of dawn, medieval towns and villages stirred awake, transforming their world from a shadowy realm of mystery and danger into a place of light, life, and renewed activity. This daily passage from night to morning was not only a physical change but a symbolic one, the victory of light over darkness, safety over fear, rest over vigilance. The morning bell, a herald of a new beginning. Across the countryside, the day often began with the resonant tolling of church bells. These bells rang from towering steeples or small chapels, their deep, sonorous voices rolling over fields and clustered rooftops. The sound was both practical and sacred, a call to prayer, a summons to community, and a signal that the long night's watch was ending. The church bells awoke peasants and nobles alike, stirring them from their beds to begin the routines of daily life. The sound was a reassurance, a constant in a world where uncertainty often loomed large, waking rituals in hearth and home. As light spilled through small windows and cracks in wooden shutters, families stirred beneath coarse blankets. Beds in medieval homes were humble, simple straw-stuffed mattresses on wooden frames or even just pallets of woven reeds. Despite their simplicity, these beds were treasured for offering warmth and refuge. Morning hygiene was minimal but meaningful. Washing one's face and hands in cold water from a basin refreshed the body and mind. For some, this act was accompanied by a whispered prayer of thanks, invoking protection for the new day. In wealthier households, servants prepared water warmed over hearth fires, providing a gentler awakening. In all homes, the day began with offerings of bread, cheese, or pottage, simple foods that would sustain the family through work and prayer. The return of light and safety. Daylight was a shield against the dangers that haunted the night. As the sun climbed higher, shadows receded, and the threats of thieves, wild animals, and spirits diminished. Villages came alive with activity. Farmers led oxen and sheep to pasture. Blacksmiths stoked their forges, craftsmen sharpened tools, and markets filled with the clamor of barter and trade. The rhythm of life quickened as the community moved from rest to labor. For night watchmen and guards who had spent hours on patrol, dawn was a sacred moment of respite. Returning home, they were welcomed with hot food and companionship, their tales of nighttime encounters blending fact and folklore. Morning prayers and spiritual renewal. Faith was woven tightly into medieval life, and the morning prayers reflected this intimate bond. Many recited the lauds, part of the divine office, praising God for the gift of light and life. In great abbeys and cathedrals, the service was sung by monks in soaring chants. In humble cottages, prayers were murmured quietly by the hearth. The act of prayer at dawn was both a personal and communal safeguard, a way to bless the day ahead and seek grace in the face of uncertainty. The biphasic sleep cycle, a different rhythm of rest. Unlike modern continuous sleep patterns, medieval people often followed a biphasic cycle. This meant sleeping in two segments, a first sleep shortly after nightfall, a waking period in the middle of the night, and a second sleep until morning. During the wakeful interval, individuals might rise to tend fires, check on children, engage in quiet conversation, or reflect through prayer and meditation. This natural pause offered a different relationship to rest, more segmented, introspective, and integrated with spiritual practice. The morning light signaled the final awakening, ending the night cycle and marking the time to rise and face the world anew. Delving into the sleep habits of medieval people reveals far more than just how they rested. It opens a vivid window onto their entire way of life, their beliefs, fears, and hopes. Sleep was a complex blend of biology, ritual, and community. It was shaped by the rhythms of the natural world, the rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, and by a deep sense of spiritual connection. Each night's rest was safeguarded by prayers, superstitions, and the vigilant watch of neighbors and guardians. The segmented sleep patterns remind us that rest was not simply about physical recuperation, but also about mental and spiritual renewal. The quiet hours in between first and second sleep were moments for contemplation, connection, and preparation for what lay ahead. In a world without electric light, insulated homes, or modern medicine, medieval people crafted a delicate balance of safety and vulnerability, faith and fear, solitude and community. Their nights were filled with whispered prayers and guarded vigils, flickering lanterns, and the ever-watchful eyes of night watchmen. By day, they embraced the warmth and promise of light, the dawn of a new cycle of life. Understanding this rhythm deepens our appreciation of the medieval mind and spirit, reminding us that even in the darkest hours, humanity seeks comfort, meaning, and hope.